Hey, good morning again on the live stream. Hi, Karen. Welcome to our live stream. Karen, can you please introduce yourself and your organization and where you're joining us from? Thank you for being with us.
My pleasure. My name is Karen Percy. I'm the Media Section President of the Media Entertainment and Arts Alliance of Australia. We are the Journalists Union of Australia, and we proudly represent Julian Assange, and we have been advocating for Julian through this time, and just so thrilled that we're actually here talking about something really positive, and that within an hour and a half or 2 hours he'll be landing in Australia. It's really exciting.
Yeah, knock on wood. It feels, from my perspective, it feels totally surreal. Can you tell us how it feels over there? Where are you exactly? And when did you, as Julian's union, get involved in this battle?
We've been involved for a number of years. I'm in the city of Melbourne, which Julian spent quite a lot of time as a teenager here. He'll be heading back to Canberra, the national capital. So we've been advocating for a number of years for Julian. He's been a member since 2007. In 2011, he won Australia's most prestigious journalism award, or WikiLeaks did, I should say, for the very work that Julian's been prosecuted for. That was our outstanding contribution to journalism. So we have advocated to governments within our members to ensure that there's been transparency about this process, but also, that this case come to an end, and it's thrilling that he's going to be coming home. But I do share the kind of concerns we've been hearing from Kristen and others earlier in the live stream about what this really means for journalists. Yes, it's emboldened us to stand up and keep doing the work, but the fact that American laws can reach all around the world, the fact that the US pursued this as a case of espionage and not journalism is very, very troubling indeed. But let's put that aside for the moment, because it is so wonderful that Julian's going to be able to be with his family, his wife, his young children, his father, his brother, his mother, and all of the incredible people here in Australia who have been supporting him and agitating and advocating and doing everything they can for so long.
Absolutely. I mean, I'd like to say on behalf of the campaign and everyone involved, just a huge thank you to everyone in the union for all the advocacy work. I mean, this is, as you know well, it's been a global movement, and that's been the beauty of it. Even though we've heard so many smears and so much misinformation over the years, there's been such a tidal wave of real organizing from unions. And obviously, the pressure in Australia has been absolutely critical in reaching this agreement. So I hope you can do, whatever you can to just pass on, everyone's appreciation, not just from Julian's team, but from everyone, to getting to this point that, we've had such a bleak news cycle of late, and to have this extraordinary moment. As you say, that there are questions to be raised, but just at least today, to be at this point, to celebrate something that so many have worked so hard for years and years and years, would be amazing. What kind of discussions or remarks or feedback are you hearing from members of the union? Like, what are you seeing and hearing?
Well, initially, I think there was real skepticism when we first saw the news coming out yesterday morning. I certainly went and looked at lots of different websites trying to go, is this true? Is this true? And it was clear something had come out of the Department of Justice and the court system in Washington. So it was still, even then, I was not convinced. And I think others around here were feeling the same way. Even if you got to say, Pan, would there be a change of course? It was really interesting to see the UK High Commissioner, Australia's High Commissioner to the United Kingdom, Stephen Smith, on the plane with Julian, and then arriving in Saipan. And there's the US ambassador to Australia, sorry, the Australian ambassador to the US, Kevin Rudd, former heavyweight Australian politicians themselves, a former foreign minister and a former prime minister, actually taking this trip with him. So they were clearly wanting to be very sure that nothing went wrong. And I will say a thanks to the political leaders of Australia. It's not something that I would very often do, but Anthony Albanese, the Australian Prime Minister, has been resolute, saying that Julian Assange has spent way too much time in prison. And I'm very pleased too that there have been no conditions put on Julian to return home. I think other than having to get permission to go to the United States. Senator Penny Wong, the Australian Foreign Minister, has also been doing work behind the scenes clearly. And the Australian Attorney General, our top top legal figure, Mark Dreyfus. So I do want to thank them. It's not often that journalists thank their political leaders, but it's very clear that the work that they have been doing behind the scenes has really come to fruition. I think it's also really critical that this is happening now, and it now takes any heat out of the US electoral cycle, that Julian's not going to get caught up in the ugliness that is likely to happen around the US presidential election in November. So it's I think, welcome on very many fronts. We've heard Carolyn Kennedy, the American ambassador here in Australia, talk about this bringing a long-standing and difficult case to a conclusion. So there's been a lot of work clearly going on. And of course, Julian's team as well, his legal team, Jen Robinson, and so many others, and all the great advocacy groups who have just been unrelenting in keeping the pressure up and the focus on Julian Assange's case. So it's really wonderful to see this coming to fruition.
Beautifully said. And I think, as you say, the timing is quite extraordinary, because I think a concern that some of us had is that this might get just bumped off to, after the American election, and for it to just drag out in the courts indefinitely. So for it to have come to this resolution now, before getting caught up in the madness that the US election cycle is quite extraordinary. Can you talk a little bit about how is the Australian media covering this and responding to this? Sort of seeing one of their own now coming back home finally.
There's been extensive coverage of this in news coverage, live blogging. We had a number of reporters who were actually able to get to the island of Saipan. It's an extremely remote, isolated place. I think you can really only fly in from Hong Kong, Tokyo, and I think Seoul. There might be some smaller flights from the Philippines or whatever. It's not an easy place to get to. Obviously, it's a US protectorate and a Commonwealth, and there's a US base there. So it was wonderful to see a couple of journalists from Australia there. There's also a couple of local reporters who have now got much larger Twitter followings, but it's been really great to sort of be able to see that coverage. But there's been wall-to-wall coverage across the board, and I think a real kind of euphoria that this has happened. Even and I was noting some of your colleagues earlier talking about, some journalists around the world who've been quite skeptical and not really wanting to get on board here. But I think ultimately this is something that people can celebrate, because I was also thrilled to see Julian looking pretty good, because we've heard he's not been able to get to any of the court cases. He hasn't actually attended court in the United Kingdom, those various appeal hearings in London, because he hasn't left Belmarsh prison, because he hasn't been able to, because he's been physically and mentally not able to do so. So I was really very pleasantly surprised to see some fat in his cheeks. I was really quite worried about what he would look like.